Welcome to another team selection video ahead of Double Game Week 20. We are going to be recapping Game Week 19 and how that has gone so far. And just to kind of timestamp this video is being recorded before the Manchester City game in the Carabao Cup and also the second game, the double game week for Fulham and Chelsea when they face each other off on the Thursday, 12th of January. This is recorded before that, so bear that in mind, and that's why the points and ranks might be a bit out of date by the time we get to the Game Week 20 deadline. But be sure to check out the deadline stream when it comes out, and there could also be an updated free hit team based on the double game weeks we had confirmed for Man United and Crystal Palace. Let me know down in the comment section below if you want to see that, and let's get straight into this video where I have 4 possible transfers, 4 players I'm looking at, and I'm looking to make 2 of them and taking a -4 hit. So let's just get straight into this video. Chelsea stood firm in the Premier League for quite some time, but Kepa should have done much better for the goal that Man City eventually scored. They made 2 substitutions, bringing on Grealish and Mahrez. They combined for the goal, and I have to say Man City started that second half really well, and there was only a matter of time before they scored. And Kepa's still a decent goalkeeper option, but when you have David De Gea over double game week in Game Week 20, and you also have the form that Chelsea are showing, which is absolutely abysmal, it does kind of put some doubts in your mind about all these Chelsea assets. But I'd rather keep Kepa Arrizabalaga than the likes of Cucurella and the other assets, including Mason Mount and the other attackers. I think Kepa's still the best Chelsea asset, but he's still, not the best option in general. You might not have too much confidence in him. That's completely understandable. But I think for the time being, I'm happy to keep him. But obviously, there are some concerns, and I don't expect a clean sheet there in the derby against Fulham. Since the restart, no defender has been better than Luke Shaw. 32 points in just 3 game weeks with 8 bonus points, 1 goal, and 3 clean sheets out of 3. And I thought Man United have been looking better and better as the game weeks have gone by, and that's now only 1 loss in the last 17 matches. But having said that, I'm still very surprised by the improvements. It's just getting better and better every single week. They've got Man City and Arsenal up next, where if they win both games, they definitely enter the title conversation. And Luke Shaw is one of the very best FPL options right now. He got a rest against Charlton in the Carabao Cup, and that's even more positive news, and he's very nailed on in the Premier League. He forms part of Man United's best 11. He's one of their very best players at the moment. He can play obviously on the left hand side, and I'd expect him to from now on, and he can also play as a centre back when needed. But with Lisandro Martinez coming back in the Carabao Cup, I would expect them to reclaim that place ahead of those 2 tough games against Man City and Arsenal. But a 15 point by Luke Shaw. I was expecting between 6 and 9 with bonus points included, but he also had it on that goal against Bournemouth. So really happy with Luke Shaw, and I'm definitely keeping him with that double in mind in 20. Cucurella though, I got him in, and it's really just to fund the other moves in this game week, and it didn't go well. The -4 hit I took in Game Week 19 didn't go according to plan, and Cucurella, I never really expected much from him. He could do something against Fulham, but like I said, I don't really expect that clean sheet for Chelsea, and I'm looking to trim down my Chelsea assets. I've got 2, and that's far too many. I think 1 maximum. Kepa's the only one I would consider, and Cucurella is definitely a sell. You could easily move Cucurella on to a John Stones and a Kanji or another Man City defender like Rico Lewis, but I just don't see a space for Cucurella in my FPL team, and I'm very, very keen to get rid of him. The last defender, of course, is Kieran Trippier with an 8-pointer against Arsenal, and he can just get bonus points against absolutely everybody. He is one of the very best FPL options in the game, and only Harry Kane and Erling Haaland have scored more FPL points this season. Another informed player who scored twice against Charlton after coming on as a sub was Marcus Rashford. He has been fantastic since the restart. He's actually got the most goals of any player in the top 5 leagues since the World Cup has ended. 7 goals in his last 6 games. I mean, what can you say about Marcus Rashford? I would back him in those games against Man City and Arsenal. He is the big danger man for Man United on the counter-attack. He can get into those pockets, but even in recent games, he has been scoring against these low-block teams with skill, with good finishing and efficiency. So Marcus Rashford is also another one I've kept highlighting over the last few weeks and months as one of the best FPL options. I was a bit skeptical going into Game Week 17 about Rodrigo versus Rashford, but after the World Cup, I was convinced about Rashford, and he has translated that form once again to the Premier League. He has shown real consistency, and I'm very happy to have him. Another reason why I've gone up in rank. Next up is Salah though, and despite his haul against Aston Villa in Game Week 17, he has been pretty woeful since then, and a move from Salah to De Bruyne is on the cards, or another double gimmick player like Riyad Mahrez, and in the long term I want to get someone like Odegaard to fill this position. I just don't think Salah is worth the money right now, and Liverpool are very inconsistent to say the least. So the next player in this list is Andreas Pereira, another one that formed part of my -4 transfers. It hasn't gone according to plan. He was subbed off before the 60th minute for the first time this season. Cucurella's got 2 points, and then my third transfer also didn't pay off because of, well, you're going to find out very soon in the forward position. I think we all know by this point, but Andres Pereira, I have to say I expected more from him, maybe a 3-pointer or 2-pointer, and then in the second game he could perhaps get an assist or something. He still has time, of course. That game against Chelsea is pretty decent for me. I think he could do something, but with no Mitrovic in that game, I think Fulham could maybe struggle a little bit, and it's a bit of a shame that he's not in there. I think it does maybe hamper Andres Pereira's prospects, but at the same time, Andres should now be on penalties, so it can go both ways. I'm hoping for some more things from him, but so far the transfers for Game Week 19 have been very disappointing. The last midfielder, though, is Martinelli, another one who failed to deliver. I think he's been very wasteful, actually, not just in the Premier League, but also in the FA Cup against Oxford. He got an assist in the end, but he's been very wasteful in all of these games since the restart, despite some good returns against West Ham and Brighton. One of the highlights of my team this week, apart from Luke Shaw, was Harry Kane's 16-pointer, courtesy of 2 goals and 1 assist. I was expecting Spurs to win, maybe by 2 goals, but I didn't expect a 4-0 thrashing and for Harry Kane to get a 16-pointer, and he carried his form over to the FA Cup where he scored the only goal against Portsmouth to progress to the next round, and I think he's the best premium option in the game besides Erling Haaland. There's only a 17-point difference between the two, actually, and you have to say those two and Trippier are the best free FPL assets right now, and when you count in form, you could also add the likes of Luke Shaw and Marcus Rashford to the equation. So with this double game week in mind, I think Harry Kane is one of the best transfers this week. The only doubt would be the yellow card suspension risk. 1 yellow card against Arsenal in the North London derby would mean he's suspended for the game against Man City, where I expect him to do well as well, to be fair. Next up is Mitrovic, who was part of my -4 hit. He did score and he was on for an 8-pointer, and not just that, he also was going to have that second game against Chelsea, but guess what? He got a yellow card around 80 minutes, and it wasn't a yellow card, let's be real. It was a very soft yellow, and I don't think it was ever a yellow card in my opinion. He got the booking, he went down to 5 points, and not only that, he also missed the second game. Actually, I think he was on for 9 points at one stage, and that would have been an 18-point haul from the first game with a second game on the horizon. It didn't happen, and it's a big shame. I thought he could do really well against Chelsea, and honestly, if I was Fulham, I would appeal that yellow card. It was that bad, to be fair. And then the last forward, we all know who it was, Erling Haaland. He came so close to scoring against Chelsea, but it wasn't meant to be, and Man City still found a way to win the game without Haaland scoring, which is very crucial. And going into the future, though, do you expect Haaland to blank in 2 or 3 games in a row in the Premier League? No, you wouldn't, and that also forms the basis and foundations for a lot of the arguments I'm seeing to captain Haaland and not captain anybody else. I'm now going to show you my ranks and my points so far in this game week before moving on to the Game Week 20 team selection portion of this video. Looking on the bright side, I did captain Mitrovic over the likes of Haaland, so I gained some points from that decision. But when you look at the other options in my team, I was considering a captaincy on Rashford. He scored 3 more points than Mitrovic, and I think the big frustration lies with the unnecessary and also unfair yellow card for Mitrovic, which ruined his prospects of a mega haul in Game Week 19, which I think he was definitely capable of, and he was on course to do that. Even if he didn't score against Chelsea, having those 9 points against Leicester plus a 2 points against Chelsea would have given him 11 points, which would have been massive. But there you go. In the end, I've got 69 points with a -4 hit taken into account. That means 65, 1,122 points overall, and my overall rank is now 322,000 in the world, and it was 1.1 million in Game Week 17 before the restart. I've got 2 players left in Cucurella and Kepa Arrizabalaga, and also Andres Pereira, can't forget him as well. I'm not expecting too many things from those 3 players. I think the main hope was Mitrovic. He's obviously eliminated from the second game, so I have to move on, and all I'm focused on at this point is Game Week 20, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. If I were to make a goalkeeper transfer this week, I wouldn't go for Ederson. I'd perhaps go for David De Gea, but I'm happy to keep Kepa Arrizabalaga at this moment in time. I talked about this a week ago. I think he can keep a clean sheet against Crystal Palace, despite how poor Chelsea have been. You look at Crystal Palace, they're another example of a London club struggling, and I still think Chelsea would do just enough to win, maybe by 1 or 2 goals to nil, and that would be quite handy, actually, to have Kepa Arrizabalaga for that game. And in that case, you could argue, well, you could keep Cucurella and even start him, but I think that's a bit different with Man City defenders looking really appealing like John Stones or Akanji, and you've got other options elsewhere. That's where I'm probably leaning more towards moving away from Cucurella. And despite my confidence in a Chelsea clean sheet in Game Week 20, I'm not that confident in Chelsea defensively to double up on the defence at this moment in time. That was merely just for the double game week, and even then, I've said multiple times and highlighted the fact that I don't trust Chelsea that much, and that a double up is always risky and it's probably very unlikely to pay off. Let's see how they do against Fulham, and then we can maybe reassess going into Game Week 20. Originally, I was going to bench Luke Shaw because he only had one game against Man City, but now with that double against Crystal Palace, that is enough to start him. He's in form, Man United are looking really promising, and I could see them even beating the likes of Man City and Arsenal. So Luke Shaw's in the team, and I'm actually looking to get a third United player potentially. Diogo Dalot came off injured, unfortunately, against Charlton in the Carabao Cup, and he was a skip in the transfer tips video anyway before that game even happened because he was just coming back from an injury, and I think it would have taken a bit of time for him to get back into the team and reassert himself as the main right back, with Malacia and Wan-Bissaka playing very well. So if I were to add a third Man United player, it would probably be either Martial, David De Gea, or I might even go a bit elsewhere, maybe go a bit different about it. But to be honest, I think David De Gea would be the main appeal in goal. But with Kepa Arrizabalaga facing Crystal Palace, I think that's enough just to keep Luke Shaw and Rashford. I'm quite happy to stick with those two for the time being, and then I can reassess going forwards. But there is the possibility of me getting that third Man United player in. Next up in this team selection is Sven Botman, and I'm finally going to start him and double up on that Newcastle defence against Fulham at home, which isn't an easy fixture. Mitrovic will be back by then, and he's going to be facing his old club there in Newcastle. But I'm quite happy to have Sven Botman, and I think Newcastle will do just about enough to keep that clean sheet. And then last but not least is Trippier, the best defender in the game. He's always going to start. I've said this before. I started him against Arsenal. I'll probably do the same against Liverpool, Man City, any fixture you can throw at me. I'm probably going to start Trippier in pretty much every single scenario this season. Having scored more goals than any other player in the top 5 leagues since the World Cup, why not consider Marcus Rashford as a possible captaincy option? I'm probably going to lean more towards Harry Kane and Erling Haaland, but Rashford would be next in line for me, even possibly over the likes of Kevin De Bruyne and also Riyad Mahrez, who are also in the captaincy equation for me. You could also point towards Heung-min Son, but I think he's been far too inconsistent this season, and if he were to captain a Spurs player, for me it'd be Harry Kane or nobody else. But with Rashford, I'm seriously considering it. He's probably third in my list, but maybe not quite enough to be my vice or my captain at the moment. But let me know your thoughts. Next up is Gabriel Martinelli away to Tottenham, and I'm not expecting great things here from Arsenal or from Martinelli himself, who has been very wasteful, especially in the last 2 games when you look at the ones against Newcastle and Oxford United. But he is still a quality option, one of the best midfielders in the game, and he offers absolutely insane value. So I'm happy to start one Arsenal attacker. And then next up is Kevin De Bruyne, who could come in for Mohamed Salah, and I'm getting rid of someone who's facing Brighton away in a dysfunctional Liverpool team, bringing in De Bruyne, who's been fantastic since the restart. He just hasn't gotten those FPL points, but I think it's only a matter of time, and he's going to be facing Man United away and Tottenham at home. I would expect him to do something across those 2 games, and I like the fixtures afterwards, including Wolves in Game Week 21 and a double in 23 against Arsenal and Aston Villa. So De Bruyne is in here, and I'm probably going to look to get him in for Salah. Last but not least is Amron, who's facing Fulham at home. That triple up in Newcastle is looking very appealing. Fulham aren't going to be easy, but I still would back Newcastle in that game, and I would go for these 3 Newcastle players and probably look to bench the Fulham ones. There are so many captaincy options this week with De Bruyne, Rashford, and not to mention Harry Kane. My only concern with him is if he picks up a yellow card in the North London derby, he's suspended for the second game against Man City, and that might be enough to put me off captaining him. If it wasn't for that, I'll be honest, I probably would put the armband on him and go a bit different, be aggressive, and try to chase down that rank. I think he could outscore Haaland this week. I genuinely believe that. My only fear is that he's suspended for the second game. Let's see what happens in the end. Next up is Erling Haaland himself, who will be captained by so many players, and his effective ownership will be absolutely insane. Despite the luxury of having so many options this week in terms of captaincy, you could even go for Luke Shaw and get a big haul, to be honest. That's the kind of week this could be. On paper, it seems like it could be a very high-scoring game week, and I hope that's the case and that we have a bit of variety in our teams, but the common denominator will be Erling Haaland as captain for a lot of our squads. But I might still go a bit different. I'm not saying Haaland's completely set in stone as the captain, as we'll talk about very soon, but I have to say, because of the suspension risk for Harry Kane and also Haaland's consistency and how well Man City are playing at the moment, it's very difficult to look beyond the Norwegian. And the last forward could be Ivan Toney in for Mitrovic for a -4 hit, and I would have him for the likes of Bournemouth, Southampton and Leeds, and you've got some good fixtures afterwards as well. Even with some tough games like Arsenal in the mix, I still think Toney can do well, but there are 2 things to look out for, as I've said multiple times in these videos. One is the injury, and it looks like Toney's progressing pretty well from his leg problem, but the other one is the suspension risk. Will he suffer a consequence and be suspended for a long period of time because of all the betting rules he has breached? Let's wait and see, but I'm very tempted to go for someone like Ivan Toney as part of a -4 hit, and Mitrovic has some tough fixtures. You look at Martial, I don't trust him enough despite the double, so if I were to get a forward in, it would be Ivan Toney. But these transfers aren't set in stone. I think De Bruyne is the most likely transfer this week. Then it's going to be a -4 hit potentially for either a defender or a striker. I'm going to be talking about that very soon. I'm going to show you some alternative transfers next up, but De Bruyne is the only one I think that is quite likely to get into my team. My bench is fairly unorthodox with the exception of Danny Ward, who typically is there. Cucurella is first sub, with Andreas Pereira and Ben White completing my bench. I've got plenty of squad depth, and you could argue I don't need to take a -4 hit for Ivan Toney, which is far too aggressive. And if you were to take a hit, why not go for a double game week player? And that's also something else I'm kind of weighing up in my head. There's a few things to consider, but in terms of the captaincy, I've currently got the armband on Erling Haaland, and I think the main reason is because there is no suspension risk, as there is with Harry Kane. There's a 5-day break between the Man United and Tottenham fixtures for Man City, and I think Haaland will start both games, and he's got a great chance of doing very well. Would I triple captain him? Perhaps, but I have to say my current thinking is to save it for either Game Week 23 or a potential double later in the season. I think by Game Week 23 we should have more information about whether Man City could have a double against the likes of Bournemouth, Brighton, or maybe even a West Ham in Game Weeks 34 or 37. And if that's the case, I've talked about the potential doubles for Man City in previous videos, so check that out. Then those doubles would be far more appealing than Man United and Tottenham. So he's a great triple captaincy option, don't get me wrong. The same goes for Harry Kane, and you could even put in someone like Rashford or De Bruyne. But I have to say, I think the double game weeks in the future could be more appealing from a fixtures perspective, and I would expect Haaland to start pretty much every single Premier League game, especially if City are still trailing Arsenal and have a chance of getting back into the title race and reclaiming that first position. So there's a lot of things to think about there. My vice captain, there'll be no surprises about this. It will be Harry Kane, but Rashford's in the conversation. Luke Shaw is not completely ruled out, and De Bruyne is always a decent shout. But would I captain De Bruyne over Haaland? Probably not. And I think De Bruyne, as good as he is, he can sometimes be a bit of an FPL troll because he plays so well, but doesn't have those assists really executed by his teammates because they just miss the chances he creates. Now let me show you a few alternative transfers and some other players I'm considering before wrapping up this team selection video. This would also entail a -4 hit, but I would be getting John Stones in for Cucurella, benching Mitrovic, and I would also, obviously not getting Ivan Toney as a result, and bring in Riyad Mahrez instead of Kevin De Bruyne. This could easily be either Mahrez or De Bruyne, and what you could see here is my transfer plan. So John Stones in for Cucurella, and also De Bruyne in for Mohamed Salah, and that is part of a -4. But I wanted to highlight Mahrez because I'm actually considering him. I think it could be a mega differential, 2 goals in the FA Cup, and he's got 3 attacking returns in the last 3 game weeks in the Premier League. One of the most informed players at the moment since the World Cup, and really the rest would be the same. Andreas Pereira second on my bench, Ben White third. The captaincy and vice captaincy would be the same, even if I brought in Riyad Mahrez, but he would also be a consideration for the captaincy as well. So the 4 players I'm considering this week are John Stones, Riyad Mahrez, Kevin De Bruyne, and Ivan Toney if he's cleared. And am I looking at anyone else really? Maybe David De Gea, but like I said, I'm quite happy to keep Kepa Arrizabalaga, and if I were to get rid of a Chelsea player, it would be Cucurella instead. But the vast majority of the team is quite set in stone, and those include Trippier, Botman, Luke Shaw, Rashford, Martinelli, Almiron, Harry Kane, and Erling Haaland. But there's a few places in here which are interchangeable, mainly that position in the 3rd forward slot with Mitrovic or Toney. Then I'm looking at that 4th defender potentially as well, or I would go for either Mahrez or De Bruyne. There's a lot of things to weigh up. I could even consider a triple up in Man City offensively with Mahrez in for Martinelli, and I could also bring in De Bruyne for Salah, but I don't want to have a triple up in Man City offensively in the long term. I think that would just invoke too much Pep roulette and rotation. You could argue that about John Stones, but I think he's also in such great form that it's difficult for Pep to bench him, and obviously that's famous last words, you could argue as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below of everything we discussed in this video, and are you going to be triple captaining Erling Haaland this week or saving it for Game Week 23, maybe 34 or 37? I've discussed all the permutations and how the Carabao Cup and FA Cup will affect the Premier League and future doubles for Man City, for example, in my previous videos like the transfer tips and the best wildcard team video. And also be sure to let me know your thoughts in terms of my transfer plans. Which one of those 4 players would you go for? I'm looking to probably get 2 in for a -4 hit, and like I said, those include mainly Man City players in John Stones, Mahrez, De Bruyne, and I've also got Ivan Toney in the mix over the likes of Anthony Martial. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to over 300 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 20,000 subscribers. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and you can also become a patron or a channel member, patreon.com/DylanRCM. Be sure to check that out, and also the links in the description below, like the Discord server and the FPL League. There's a lot of content heading your way, and I wish you all the very best of luck for the rest of the FPL season. Take care, enjoy the football, all of that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.